Hello again, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for this Saturday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting today's show. Up first, graphic here, some good soaking rains moved into areas of Bristol Bay on up into the western interior and southwest interior today. Actually on up into along the Yukon River. Killbuck had 1.17 inches. That's a 24-hour amount, while off to the south, Togiak had nearly an inch in the same period. And up there in the northern Kuskokwim Valley, west-southwest of McGrath, Flat picked up 3/4 of an inch of precipitation, while Holy Cross had also about 3/4 of an inch, and just a little bit less than that at McGrath. And the next graphic here showing the fire danger is now not even highlighted there over the upper Yukon Valley, where it has seems like it's been high since the snow cover, but the recent rains with about 4/10 of an inch falling at Beaver in the last 24 hours, and 7 Mile picking up half an inch. That's pretty well beaten it back with good soaking rains falling there, but still areas of extreme over the Noatak Valley where it remained windy today and dry, and also over the Seward Peninsula with high to very high fire danger again from the north slope across the DeLong Mountains, western Brooks Range. Just about all of the Seward Peninsula, Nulato Hills on down into the Yukon Delta, and part of the Kuskokwim Delta as well. From there, taking a look at the hazardous weather graphic, there are no watches, warnings, or advisories out for anywhere in the state for the next day or so. Due to a distinct lack of storminess, here on the satellite imagery, you can see low pressure circulating and actually pulling back to the southwest, it appears here, especially that brighter mass of clouds over the Alaska Peninsula up toward Nunivak Island. And that's what brought all the rain to Bristol Bay in the western and southwest interior today, and clouds extending up along the Yukon River there, all the way over toward Dawson and Eagle. And even today, lighter amounts of rain, but it's still a wet day and cool over the Tanana Valley with anywhere from 1 to 3/10 of an inch falling on down toward Northway from Fairbanks, and showering the Copper River Basin. Had some clearing over south central Alaska this afternoon with still a few showers around, and the southeast coast anywhere from a half inch falling today, or 1/3 of an inch at Sitka. Juneau picked up 1/4 of an inch, and Lituya Bay had around half an inch of precipitation with leftover moisture there. But you can see out over the Bering Sea, not much going on, just clouds, and then you can see the outer edges of a cirrus cloud shield there associated with a system that's well off to the southwest, and really a summertime pattern here with the mostly clear skies today, again up over the northern Koyukuk, Killbuck Valley, out to the Noatak Valley, into the northern Seward Peninsula, with temperatures reaching the low 70s, but winds still quite gusty up there, anywhere from 30 to 25 gusts as high as 40 miles an hour through the passes of the Brooks Range on out toward the northwest coast, and then really light winds and kind of a cloudy, showery, cool day. Again, with some clearing over south central Alaska, as well as a few other areas, but generally it's kind of a wet, damp mid-June day on down the southeast coast, Kodiak Island, and of course the rainfall's beginning to lessen up now in intensity as far as the rainfall rates over the southwest interior and Bristol Bay. But as you can see, the forecast tonight, that'll continue, and in some cases end with possible clearing as the wind flow becomes a little more easterly. Could see a few areas of clearing over the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, northern Bristol Bay. Definitely a lot less in the way of precipitation. As that low weakens, it'll keep it generally wet, cloudy, with low flying conditions over the Alaska Peninsula, back toward the Pribilofs, Aleutians, IFR, but winds a non-factor along with precipitation, and the Panhandle looking at diminishing showers, area of rain and showers persisting over the Tanana Valley into the northern Kuskokwim Valley, and along the Alaska Range, but dry to the north and a distinct decrease in the winds there for the northwest coast and through the passes of the Brooks Range. And for Sunday, stays cloudy, cool, and damp with scattered afternoon thunderstorms over the interior, especially the central interior southward to the Alaska Range. But south of the Alaska Range, no thunder and storm activity expected or in the forecast, with areas of showers, light rain, fog and drizzle, with a fog and drizzle along the coast into Prince William Sound, Gulf of Alaska. Showers and clouds southeast Alaska, and rain with that front there for Kodiak Island into the Alaska Peninsula. But rainfall amounts will be lighter than what was seen today. And for the outlook on Monday, drier. In fact, a return to partly sunny skies through south central Alaska, Cook Inlet, on down to possibly Kodiak Island. Probably be a mostly cloudy day there. Maybe some clearing for the Prince William Sound area. Isolated thunderstorms possible there along the Alaska Range, maybe into the western Copper River Basin, but just a slight threat. Better chance, though, up along that trough up to the north there, near and just south of the east central Brooks Range. Light rain, fog, and drizzle. Eastern Arctic coast, fog, low clouds, widespread IFR. A pretty good bet for the Chukchi Sea through the northern Bering Sea, Bering Strait, all of the Bering Sea and Aleutians. And a weak system spreads some light rain and fog and drizzle, mainly with the heaviest amounts that won't be that heavy into the central and southern southeast coast. Lows for tonight, lower to mid-30s there for the central eastern Arctic coast, otherwise in the interior, upper 40s to lower 50s, and mostly in the 40s for southern Alaska and the Panhandle as well as the Aleutians. Highs for tomorrow, 70s, lower to mid, warmest there from the Kobuk Valley area in toward the Kalskag area. Near 70 for Tananov, lower 60s Fairbanks, and also lower 60s for the Susitna Valley in south central Alaska. 50s Kodiak Island, the southeast coast, upper 40s for the Alaska Peninsula, and near 50 St. Lawrence Island, followed by lows in the lower 50s from the southwest coast right on up into the upper Yukon Valley areas, and then afternoon highs Monday, 60s and lower 70s, with lower 60s for south central Alaska, and mostly in the 50s for the Panhandle.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on to flight and weather. IFR eastern Bulverde Coast into the North Slope, VFR to the west, VFR Brooks Range down to at least across the up Yukon River Valley area, all the way out to the Delta and the coastline there. Good VFR, Kuskokwim Bay, marginal VFR, Tanana Valley, especially the upper Tanana Valley, 40-mile country, much of the Alaska Range. And we've got for the areas east and south of the Alaska Range, areas of IFR scattered in with areas of VFR and intermixed with marginal VFR. Marginal VFR, North Gulf Coast, right on down the Panhandle. IFR, Alaska Peninsula, and all of the Aleutians out to Kiska Island, then becomes mostly VFR. For the afternoon, we've got VFR for St. Lawrence Island through the Bering Strait into the Chukchi Sea, marginal VFR on the central and western Arctic coast, IFR holding on the eastern coastline, VFR North Slope down into the Kobuk, Koyukuk, Selawik, and upper Yukon valleys, with some marginal VFR over the mid-Yukon River Valley area there, and VFR Seward Peninsula all the way into Bristol Bay, IFR North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, and the southern or the east side of the Kenai Peninsula, cutting off right around Yakutat and staying marginal on down toward Dixon Entrance. With IFR, Alaska Peninsula, Western Alaska Peninsula, now covering all of the Aleutians and all of the Bering Sea up to St. George Island. We'll call it marginal for St. Paul on up to St. Matthew Island. And then IFR slips on up to St. Matthew Island for Monday morning with the Pribilofs right on the eastern edge of the IFR zone that extends all the way back to Shimian Attu and eastward to the Fox Islands. VFR, though, for the north side of the Alaska Peninsula and Kuskokwim Bay into just west of Iliamna, with marginal VFR and a band from the Yukon Delta coast, east-northeast across all the Tanana Valley, Alaska Range, into the northern Copper River Basin, northern Sitna Valley, with VFR for Cook Inlet, marginal VFR, North Gulf Coast into the Panhandle, IFR, central western Arctic coast. And for Monday afternoon, IFR holding over the eastern Arctic coast and VFR there from the Brooks Range into the Upper Yukon, Kobuk, Koyukuk valleys out to Selawik, Kotzebue, and the northwest coast, Kivalina and Noatak Valley. Bering Strait, marginal VFR, including Teller, Wales, but not quite into Nome. Norton Sound, mostly, basically, VFR. IFR there, St. Matthew Island, Pribilofs, on down to the central western Aleutians, marginal for the Fox Islands. Marginal VFR, areas of the Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island, and the Panhandle, mostly marginal with some scattered VFR across southern Alaska. Passes, Anatuvik, VFR. Same forecast for Adigan and Lake Clark Merrill. Call it VFR tomorrow. Rainy, VFR. Windy, though, marginal throughout the day. Isabel, marginal VFR. Mentesta looking pretty marginal as well. Tanita, mostly marginal VFR day for Sunday. And Portage, marginal VFR with IFR pretty likely on the eastern entrance the entire day. And Chilkoot and White, marginal. Freezing levels, 8,000 feet in the interior, and then 10,000 feet over there in Russia and in Canada, and 6,000 feet southern Alaska. Icing, we've got mixed icing areas of freezing level 17,000 feet. Nothing really all that significant, but shaded area here showing definitely a potential for it. Alaska Peninsula, North Gulf Coast, into the Panhandle, covering much of southern Alaska right up into the central interior and areas of the Seward Peninsula. From there, going to the jet stream, upper level highs kind of to the north there, southeast of Banks Island, up over the, say, centered over the Brooks Range, and another one, the Russian Far East, with upper level lows south of that, and therefore that keeping the Pacific jet south of the forecast area for the most part. But one branch sort of breaks off and cuts up across the Panhandle out of the southwest. At 9,000 feet, we've got low pressure over the Alaska Peninsula with the greatest winds around that, and also the windier conditions western Arctic coast, but those winds not really that significant. Variable over the interior, 3,000 feet, variable winds over interior Alaska, light in the Gulf of Alaska, variable for the Panhandle. And for turbulence, no significant turbulence forecast anywhere around the state, at least for small aircraft. There's always that chance you hit some brief choppiness due to convection in the afternoon, but it won't be anything very widespread.
We can't just put the fires out because we can't put them out. We've tried that now for a century and it doesn't work. It just makes the next one worse.
You may see a place like this and think, total devastation. And it's not your fault for thinking that.
But that depiction is, as we've learned from countless experts over the last 2 weeks, not the whole story, and not how you should think about wildfires.
The truth is, there are lots of types of habitats out west, and fire affects them all in unique ways. So it's important to start thinking about the big picture with wildland fires. So let's first rewind. To help us understand what's going on out west, Rob and I started calling up the experts, and what we found was that the story of fire, particularly in the west, is complex. So to understand it, we planned a road trip.
Road trip time!
The goal of our road trip was to see as many forests as we could and meet experts around the region to help us understand the role fire plays out here. First destination was to find the forest burned by the now famous Great Fires of 1910. And at the heart of what is known as the Big Blow-Up, the logical first place to stop, the city of Wallace.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi.
How's your day?
Good. Haley and I are in this cute town of Wallace, Idaho, which was completely destroyed by the 1910 fires. You can see how much damage this fire actually did. Let's send up the drone and see what the surroundings look like now. What we found was a small town surrounded by a dense forest, with every single tree just over 100 years old.
So everything we see behind us now, that's all new growth since 1910.
And to help us put these historic fires and the forests around Wallace in perspective, we met up with historian Diane Smith.
This is Wallace, and here are your fires.
All of this is the 1910 fires.
This is not that unusual. The fact is, it just was at a time in our development as a country. We noticed it, we paid attention to it, and we got the national attention for it.
Right. As it turns out, these fires helped reinforce the idea at the time that every fire needed to be suppressed at all costs. And this suppression for so long has led to new problems, namely thick forests full of fuel. But don't just take my word for it. Let me show you the difference. Notice how different this place is than this one that has been thinned out quite heavily in the past, or like an area like this that's been burnt quite frequently. In fact, both of these areas show how many forests would have looked in the past under regular burns. The dead and low-growing material gets consumed easily by fire, very much unlike this forest, which has had fire suppression for over 100 years and could lead to a high-intensity fire.
And all of this dry, dead material, that's problematic.
So we went looking for a big fire and just followed the smoke. Oh gosh, a huge crown fire. I gotta get this. These high-intensity fires aren't great because in many forests they kill all the trees over a large area, even in forests that used to be very resistant to frequent fires. And nobody knows that better than the people that work in this particular forest.
There's green coming back, and I guess I've gotten somewhat used to it, and I still have hope that the entire Sierra Nevadas won't look like this, that we can maybe get ahead of it. So the fires nowadays can move from the surface right into the tree canopies really easily, where in the past, fires would have kept trees pruned, they would have kept fuel densities low, and so now you end up with a lot more high severity fires in the West than had a fire regime kept under its historic recurrence. This to me is more a lesson of fire exclusion and keeping fire out of the system. If we're keeping it out of when it would burn with a beneficial effect, it will burn, and the probability of it burning at an unbeneficial state is higher.
So again, this is where it's complicated. We thought if only we could stop the fires, we'd win the fight. But the fires like the King Fire here show that stopping the fires only made it worse. Add that to the fact that we're living closer than ever to these wild lands. So to help us understand the wildland-urban interface, we met up with CAL FIRE. And as we were pulling up to this neighborhood, one of the residents quickly came out to tell us about the latest fire.
Yeah, our biggest fear is fire. It was very scary. I mean, everybody was honking and get out, and you know, there's a fire.
This is the risk across California. The response piece alone isn't going to solve this challenge if the homeowners aren't organized.
Because we're all in the same boat. We're one match away from everybody losing everything. It's a real fear.
Literally, we could have that fire spread up in here within a matter of seconds.
Wow.
California is going to have fires. We're not going to stop all the fires in California, so we have to have an infrastructure that's fire resistant. We need to work on policies that help us engage in active management of our forest. That's using prescribed fire as a tool. It's all the things in the toolbox. It's a combination of managing our forest and a combination of protecting our communities that are in them.
If it wasn't complicated enough, this made it very clear that you can't just let the fires burn whenever they start. The forests need to be managed to help mitigate the risk to us. But using fire seems to be one of the keys to making things safer, and knowing the science behind fire is always key to implementing good management. Fire Sciences Lab, right over here. So we made a stop at the Missoula Fire Lab to try to understand what we know about fire.
What? You see the flames at the very top and how they're sticking to the slope?
They really are. Everybody's laying down.
They're laying down. Well, that's flame attachment. Actually a very difficult thing to understand.
Here at the Fire Lab, the scientists study the basics of fire. Understanding the complexities here helps firefighters and forest managers in the field better predict and fight wildland fires.
Fires are inevitable. The only choices that we really have is what kind of fire to have and when do we want it. And that's it. Almost? Ready. You're ready. Jason's ready.
Mark's team is prepping to light a huge bed of precisely cut cardboard.
You're not going to be in any danger. So when the lights go out, don't move. Gasoline.
This is one of many experiments they'll run to understand the physics of fire, how it moves, how it spreads, and all of this measured by precise scientific instruments and high-speed cameras. Tens of thousands of pieces of cardboard up in flames in mere seconds. The ongoing research will help us better understand fire with the ultimate goal that we can live better with it. But can we do that? There is one forest we knew of that seems to have figured out this coexistence with fire, a place where fires burn all summer, every summer. It's part of their way of life and a mentality we wanted to know about. And here we went out with our guides Frank Lake and Steve Valentine, who work with the local U.S. Forest Service and tribe to help keep a healthy forest.
This is perfect. The fires basically come through and cleared out the understory, and all that's left are the trees.
Yeah, it's black and it's charred, and you just see a few of the earliest sprouts, but you come back in here a year, it's going to be alive again.
And to many, this may seem destroyed, but they view it differently here.
That fire's medicine, because it's not if it comes, it's when it comes. We need fire, and fire needs us.
You see, fire needs people to remind us how important fire is to the ecosystem. Frank and Steve's ancestors have been burning this forest for millennia. It's now part of what makes the forest special. They just want to make sure that it's not forgotten.
Basically, what you leave behind is what's important.
When they say this is your foods and your medicines, your sacred places, your springs, your water, that's essential, that's who we are as people. We have to learn to live with fire. We have to learn to respect fire. We have to maintain that security. That's why I do what I do.
Haley and I have learned a lot on our journey. We've learned that fire is complicated, and it's not as black and white as we make it out to be, and it is an integral part of our forests. They've had fire running through them for thousands of years, and they will continue to have fire in them in the future. And we can't always put the fires out. We have to decide what kind of fires to live with, and that is why we need to work with these fire crews from around the country. We also need a public who understands the importance of fire on the landscape. A healthy forest, you see, is a forest that lives with fire.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at today's sea ice analysis, continuing the slow dissolve there in the Chukchi Sea. Still a bit of ice on the north side of the Seward Peninsula and in toward Kotzebue Sound, but not too much there around Point Hope, Cape Lisburne. And of course, it increases as you go up along the western coastline there toward the central coast. And for the marine forecast for the southern coast tomorrow, for the Panhandle on the outer coastline, south coast, south 15 knots, seas 5 feet. North coast, southeast 15 with 5-foot seas. Lynn Canal, maybe a little lighter than today, where it was 25 to 30 knot winds. Tomorrow, looking at south 20 knots, light for Stevens Passage, south at 10, south 15 for Clarence Strait. And for Monday, south 15 for Clarence Strait, otherwise south to southeast winds for the central and northern inside water. Small craft advisories with that incoming system on the south coast out of the east-southeast coming up to 25 knots, seas building to 9 to 10 feet, and then east winds increasing late in the afternoon on the north coast to about 20 knots with 8-foot seas. Cook Inlet tomorrow, light winds out of the east-northeast, 10 knots, seas 2 feet. Kamishak Bay, east at 20. And that forecast good for the Barren Islands and the western North Gulf Coast. East side there around Middleton Island, southeast at 15, Prince William Sound, mostly east at 15 with 2-foot seas. For Monday, southeast 10 for Prince William Sound and the eastern North Gulf Coast, east at 15, otherwise becoming lighter and more variable there for the western coast. Barren Islands east at 15 knots, Kamishak Bay, light east winds at 10, and Cook Inlet, southwest breeze 10 to 15 knots with 4-foot seas. And for Shelikof Strait, east winds 20 knots. East side Kodiak Island, southeast at 15 with seas at 5 feet. Northeast winds 25 knots. That's high enough for small craft advisories there for the Alaska Peninsula. Both sides of the peninsula with 6 to 7 foot seas. And Bristol Bay looking at northeast winds at 20 knots with 4-foot seas. And for Monday, Kodiak Island, call it east-northeast, 15 to 20 knots. Strongest Shelikof Strait, Alaska Peninsula north 15 to 20 knots, 4 to 6 foot seas, and Bristol Bay east at 15 with 2-foot seas. On Alaska Island, west-northwest 25 knots with 5 to 6 foot seas. Unmac Island west at 20 knots, 4 to 5 foot seas, and even the lighter ones for Adak and Atga at about 15 out of the west-northwest. And for Amchitka on out to Attu, northwest at 15. For Monday, Shemya to Kiska, northeast 15, seas 8 feet. Amchitka toward Adak, north at 10, and Atka, Adak both in that zone. North at 10, light winds. And variable winds 10 knots for Unmac Island, and kind of variable 10 to 15 for Unalaska Island. For the St. Lawrence Island zone, tomorrow, northeast at 15, and Yukon Delta coast east at 15. Kuskokwim Delta coastline there, northeast at 20, and the Pueblo St. Matthew Island looking at light northerlies at 15 knots with 4-foot seas. And for Monday, southeast at 10 for the Pueblos, otherwise west-northwest winds, 15 knots for the southwest coast, St. Matthew Island, and St. Lawrence Island, as well as Norton Sound. For the eastern Beaufort Sea coast tomorrow, east 15 knots of the far eastern zone there, and on the east side, generally light winds out of the southeast at 10, south 15 on the central coast, west 15 on the west side, northwest 15 from Wells to Cape Thompson. And for Monday, from Wells to Cape Thompson, small craft advisories, north winds increase to 25 knots, with 20-knot winds up to Cape Beaufort. And the western, central, and east side, or the remainder of the Arctic coast, northwest at 15 knots. And then seas in the open water areas running anywhere from 2 to 3 feet. For tonight, look for light winds, low clouds, and fog along the Arctic coast. Locally over the north slope, it'll be dry with clearing over the inland areas. And a lot drier over the southwest part of the state, Bristol Bay up into the Kuskokwim Valley, but showers persist northern Kuskokwim Valley with areas of rain and showers extending up into the upper Tanana Valley, McKinley Park, maybe into the northern Susitna Valley, but kind of showery over the Copper River Basin areas. And for tomorrow, thunderstorms in the afternoon scattered around the interior, north of the Alaska Range, areas of rain and fog with cool temperatures, southern Alaska, showery for the Panhandle. Outlook for Monday, kind of a rebound, drier, and a little bit more sun over the interior. Isolated thunderstorms possible. More rain moves into the central and southern southeast coast during the afternoon. And the Bering Sea and Aleutians stay foggy with widespread low clouds and fog and light wind conditions. And that includes the Chukchi Sea and along the Arctic coast with some light rain possible up over the eastern Brooks Range.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.